All right. Welcome everyone to Youth Ministry and Mentorship 101. I'm very excited today because with me I have Pastor Pedro Perez, the Pathfinder Director for the Florida Conference. So, how are you doing today, Pastor?
I am feeling good. Thank you very much.
That's awesome. Um, I know you've been there since at least 2010, 2011,
2010.
because your previous post was the Southern New England Conference Youth Director,
Yes.
where I wasn't an area coordinator at the time. I was a assistant director, and could I tell this story real quick, Pastor?
Please do.
Yeah. You came to our club for a uniform inspection, and I told my Pathfinders to always be motivated and loud and proud. And you came up to one of my Pathfinders who had the Pathfinder World Patch upside down, and then you said, did you ask them a question about that patch? And he said, yes, sir. And then you asked him, uh, did you know that the patch is upside down though? And then he was like, oh, he got real quiet. He didn't know what to say. And I was really excited too. I said, everybody, the youth director is inspecting our club. Get ready. So, yeah, that was a cool experience. So,
It's an easy thing to do. It's easy to have that thing upside down.
yeah. All right. And my son, my son came in. All right. Um,
That's me, Adrian.
could you give us a quick,
Hey, that's me.
quick,
Someone with my hand,
oh, hold on.
Daddy.
Hold on. Let me
Stop
just.
it. Stop.
So, Pastor, could you give us a quick bio about you and why, how you got started into ministry?
Sure. So back when I was in academy, I was in my senior year, and the religious chair, came down from Union College, from Lincoln, and he met with our Bible class. And I remember he came in and he was talking to us about the different things Union College offered. And then he made this statement. He said, for those of you that are thinking about ministry, I'd like to leave you with this thought. And he said, God had one son and he made him a minister. And I was like, what? I thought, man, if God had one son and the one thing he asked him to do was be a minister,
Wow.
that spoke to my heart. And I said, oh my goodness, I think God's calling me to ministry.
Wow.
And I remember I started teaching Sabbath school. I got actively involved in academy in my last year. And it was kind of, for me, the test to say, is this really in my head, or is this something God's really maybe given me a gift for, and he could use my life to be a blessing to others? So I kept that in mind. I went to Union College. I was thinking about two careers, actually, when I got to college. I was still thinking about physical therapy because I love the body and the way it's made, and God who made the body, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's always fascinated me. So I thought physical therapy, and I thought religion, theology.
Mm.
And so I said, God, I'm going to take general chemistry because that's kind of a basic for PT, like you got to know your sciences. And I'm going to take a class called Life Teachings of Jesus, where you go through the four gospels and you try to figure out who Jesus is and was and what he said and what it means. And so I remember chemistry was killing me. I was like, this stuff's crazy. I thought I
Yep.
took chemistry in high school so I'd get a straight A. But
Yeah.
after 2 weeks, everything I learned in high school was history. Like, we were learning new stuff. I was like, I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
So it was fun. But I remember throughout that year, God blessed me and gave me an A in chemistry. So it wasn't that I couldn't do
Amen.
chemistry and so I was going to fail. But I was like, it doesn't draw out the same passion in me that ministry did. And life teachings opened my eyes to a whole new picture of Jesus. And I was like, whoa, why didn't anybody ever tell me all this stuff about Jesus? Like, how
Wow.
come they've been keeping this stuff a secret? And then it was like, well, it's been there, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, like all the stories about Jesus. But it awakened in me a deeper love for Jesus. And then again in college, I kept getting more involved. I led out again in Sabbath school, led out in campus ministries. And then after 2 years of college, I felt God opening a door to go be a student missionary, which was another test for me to say, hey, what's that going to be like? Came back and got more involved, became, part of the ASB government with the religious vice president and all this stuff. And then it was like, okay, now you're going to have a church. Like, you're going to be able to be practicing in a church. And it was just like all this stuff. In the meantime, I had also been working at summer camp and getting experience there. And I'd been growing there from like a counselor in training to a counselor to where I became boys director. And I was like the assistant director. So it was like all this stuff was like, man, I would love to do this. I love ministry. I love working with kids. I got involved in the academy while I was in college, became a chaplain at the academy. So all this stuff just kind of confirmed for me that calling that I felt years ago in academy. So I just kept diving in, and God opened a door for me to go to Michigan Conference, where I lived for 10 years. And we pastored in a variety of different places. I pastored in Lansing, Michigan as a youth pastor, came back to seminary, pastored in Spanish churches. So I got an opportunity to pastor a Spanish church. From there, I went up to the Upper Peninsula. So I had my own district. I had 3 churches in the Upper Peninsula, and it was like 115 miles from my door to the 3 churches and back home.
Wow.
And so I was like, wow, I'm getting all the experience. From there, they sent me back down to the academy. I taught Bible for 2 years. And after that, I was like, I don't think I'm called to be a teacher. Like, I respect teachers. I appreciate what they do. But an opportunity to be a youth pastor opened up. So I went back down to Berrien Springs, became a youth pastor. And I was thinking, man, everything I've wanted to do, pastor Spanish churches, pastor my own church district, be a youth pastor, I got to do that twice. And then one guy shared some advice with me when I was at summer camp. I said, what advice would you give to a young pastor just starting out? And his advice shocked me, because he said, as soon as you get ordained, move to another conference. And I was like, what? What does that even mean? And he said, usually the conference president who invites you into ministry will always see you as the kid from college that he invited into ministry. And it'll be tough for him to see you any different. So you're the young kid who's inexperienced, who doesn't know what they're doing, but he's got potential. And so I thought about that. I got ordained in Michigan, stayed around for another 4 or 5 years, but then an opportunity came to go to Florida. And so in Florida, I was like, wow, this could be it. Like, and plus we were ready for a transition. My wife and I had been talking about that, ready to try something new, and felt God was leading us to something new. So they called me to be a family life pastor. And I was like, I don't know what that is. I've never been a family life pastor, but I understand that I'm going to be in charge of everything from children to family. So we went to Florida, became a family life pastor for 3 years. And then we got a call to New England. And I don't think you know this, and very few people probably in New England know this, but I turned that down 4 times.
Wow. I did not know that. Did not know that.
Yeah. What happened was a friend of mine told me, Pedro, there's a deal up in New England that you really need to check out. They're looking for a youth director. And I was like, no, I think we need to stay in Florida. So then he talked to somebody else. So somebody else called me, and he said, there was Bill Wood, the Union Youth Director. Bill Wood said, Pedro, like, you need to come check this out. Like, I think this is a great opportunity for you. It's a great place to start, like the great conference. And I was like, no, Bill, I think I'm good. I think we'll stay here. Then Frank talked to him, and the president called me. And I was like, no, actually, I think we're good. Like, I think we'll stay. He called me again. He said, no, Pedro, you really need to come. He came to Florida, and he talked to us. And so he's like, you really need to come consider this. Like, you just keep coming on my mind. And I was like, I think we're good. So when he asked the second time, he said, just at least do this. Just come check it out. That's all I'm asking. Just come check it out. And so after that, I talked with my wife, and she said, go check it out. Like, if you think God's opening that door, go check it out. So I remember flying into Manchester, New Hampshire. I remember driving over to the conference office, and the whole drive was just like, this is it. Like, I think this is where God's calling us. And then I met with the conference. I met with the leadership. And to me, the funniest thing was in the interview, the treasurer at that time asked me a question. He said, so Pedro, here in the youth department in Southern New England, like, you'll have $1 million budget. Have you ever run $1 million budget before? And I was like, I can tell where his question's coming from, right? Like, he wants to know what I can do, how I can handle money. And so I answered him straight in the eye. I looked at him and I said, you know what? I've never had $1 million budget, but I have had a $3,000 budget.
Wow.
And I said, and my treasurer was pretty happy with me, because I knew how much I had to spend. I knew how much I had to work with for the year, and I never went over my budget. So I'm guessing it's the same principle, right?
That's
You know
right.
what you have, you can't overspend it, whether it's a $3,000 or $1 million budget, doesn't matter. It's the same principle. And he was like, okay. So I was like, whew, got out of that one, but that
Yeah.
was fun. I remember that from the interview. And then, so we accepted the call and we went there, and man, those were 4 years of a great journey for us. It was
Amen.
incredible. Like God gave me a big gift just to have the chance to get into youth ministry, to be a youth director. I felt grateful every day for the opportunity to be there in that role. And not only that, but God gave me an opportunity to work with some awesome people that even when I came to Florida, I would compare people here that I met in Florida to, they're like my person in Southern New England. They're like this person. They're like that person. And I'd remember these names and faces that had really helped me learn what it meant to be a youth director. And I transferred that back here. But those 5 summers at Winnipeg and 4 years were a blessing. Our kids got to be around some of the best young adults we could recruit for summer camp. They got to see different parts of the country. They were blessed by that. Southern New England always will hold a special place in my heart
Amen.
because of the way people love me and the way people gave me an opportunity, and they were willing to work together. And it was a gift.
Wow.
And I treasure those years. It really was a foundation. And then after those years there, I heard that there was an opening in Florida. And
Yeah.
so we were like, what does that mean? Like, go back to where we came from? Like, what's that all about?
Hmm.
And I'll never forget, I was actually sitting in the office at Southern New England when I got the call from one of the vice presidents in Florida. And they shared with me a dream of where they were trying to take Florida to integrate everything, all the ministries that had anything to do with young people. They wanted to
Hmm.
integrate that into something called Integrated Youth Ministries. And
Okay.
as he talked to me about it, I was like, that sounds really awesome. Like, that would be a great opportunity to be a part of what they're trying to accomplish in Florida. And so God put that on my heart and opened that door. And it has been quite a journey here. I
Wow.
started in 2010, like you remember.
Hmm.
When we got here on like a Friday, and that night they started their leadership convention. And so we went straight to the leadership convention and
Wow.
started meeting everybody and doing all that stuff. We hadn't even moved in yet. We went straight to a hotel and just started meeting the people. But it's been great to, again, find a great group of adults that I get to work with, people that are passionate about club ministry. When I came to Florida, they asked me to do everything from adventures, pathfinders, youth, young adults, campus ministry. And so we did it all. And then after 6 years, they said, we think that's too much, so we're going to split it up. So in 2016, they moved me to Pathfinders and Adventures. And for the last 2 years, I've had the privilege to give all of my attention exclusively to club ministries. And so
Okay.
somebody else has come on board to pick up youth, young adult, campus ministry. And so
Yes.
what that's done is it's given me a chance to say, wow, there was a lot that we needed to fix. Like, I didn't
Wow.
see it before, but there's a lot that we need to do to improve and tighten and sharpen. But when you're dealing with everything, it's tough to give something, the attention that it really needs. So for the last 2 years, it's been a chance to go deeper, to
Okay.
kind of start to see holes that I never saw before. I feel like I have a different bandwidth in terms of I don't feel drained and exhausted. And
Hmm.
so there's a spark of creativity that's come back and a spark of energy that's come back. So I'm thankful for that. That doesn't mean the transition was easy, because we
Yeah.
spent 6 years trying to build something. And then in the transition, things all start to fall apart on the other side. And I've always felt that there's a need for youth and young adult. Unfortunately,
Okay.
I got short circuited on that chance to do that.
Mm.
So anyway, in terms of kind of the history and the way we've been, that's where we are. And starting here in 2019, we are the Pathfinder and Adventure directors here for Florida Conference.
All right. Wow. So, Pastor, that was an amazing journey that you told us about, and you gave so many things in that story. You told how you were mentored. That story of that pastor who told you that advice, that what the conference that ordains you move. That is
Yeah.
something I've never heard. This is one of the reasons why I'm having this podcast, to learn from pastors and get those little tidbits, because that's something I've never heard. Because usually I think young pastors thinking is, this is the conference that ordained me. Now I owe them a little bit something, so I should give them something back. But
Yeah.
that advice that the the leadership will look at you in the same light, while if you move, they'll look at you in a different light. That's beautiful. And you already covered like two of my other questions, which is why you love youth ministry, and we could hear through that story that you're passionate about it. And in the last 2 years, you're focused on Pathfinder ministry. Let me ask you this: what do you see a little bit different in the Florida conference in Pathfinder ministry versus what you've seen in, Michigan and Southern New England?
Yeah. So in Florida, when I got here, there was a sense of accomplishment that I hadn't seen in other places, because they had done some things that other places hadn't done. And they had
Okay.
accomplished some things that others hadn't accomplished. And here's what I mean. They had created their own store where they were supplying their own conference needs.
Yes.
Like, I know in New England, we had a little store. Like, I remember Carol running back behind her desk to
Yeah.
go grab a patch or something there. But we're talking about a full-blown store, everything that they need to uniform their kids for Adventures in Pathfinders, they can find it here from us. The other thing I think that's different is Florida had done a good job of creating a bunch of honors that were Florida honors. And that's both in adventure ministry for awards and patches, and for Pathfinder ministry. So there are honors and awards that kids can get that are unique to Florida, and other
Wow.
people can get them, but Florida was very intentional about creating a lot of original content, and a lot of people in North America would look to Florida to get some of that stuff because it was such good content. And so that's, I think, a good thing. Another thing that Florida did was they were serious about saying, how can we reach out to the upper age kids? So
Mhm.
in Florida, they created 2 additional class levels that go beyond what traditionally is guide, and it's navigator pioneer.
Yeah.
And so for the Pathfinder who wants to keep going and is into classwork, Florida Pathfinder leadership back in the 90s was concerned because they saw kids turning 17, 18 and disappearing from the club. There was no longer class level work for them to do. So they were going away. So they said, that's not good. Like, if the kid likes Pathfinders, let's give him structure and create new class levels for him. So
Yeah.
those were some of the things that I think Florida had done to just make a difference in terms of saying, we want to contribute in a big way to our kids in Florida, and open also to contributing in a bigger way to the division. And I think those are good things. The picture some people had of Florida outside of Florida was not as pretty as the people in Florida had as the picture.
Mm,
So some people
yes.
outside said Florida's trying to do their own thing, like they
Hmm.
just want to go their own way. They're renegades, they're rebels, they're doing whatever they want. They don't care about the division. And so as so what we tried to do was say, how can we capture the positive essence of what Florida's been doing,
Yeah.
maintain that, continue to grow that, and also bring back a sense of Florida is part of the North America division. Like, Florida
Yeah.
is a part of a bigger picture. It's not this stepchild, or it's not this orphan child. So I've worked with our team to say, hey, we're going to be a conference that supports the division. And I
Okay.
thank God for the team that's worked with us, and we've come aboard. So we've adjusted some things, we switched some things, we came back on board with some things, and I think that's healthy. I think those are
Yeah.
good things. Some of my people in New England would tell me, man, they pay their volunteers in Florida. And I was like, what?
Mm,
And part of it was that they were giving a pretty good package to people who are helping. Like,
wow.
they had set up this system. It wasn't necessarily payment, but it was a whole different system than what we had in New England. And
Wow.
so part of that was, what does that look like? Like, is that sustainable? Can we afford to do that? Like, I totally believe that our coordinators need to be reimbursed for mileage. Like, that's to me, that was something that I was like, hey, you're doing it for us, so we will put aside budget money to be able to support you. and at least give you something to cover your gas, your wear and tear on your vehicle. And so what happened was we had to standardize that, though, because that was all over the place.
Yeah.
And so part of that standardizing that and pulling that together meant we're going to be fair to everybody. Like whether you're at this level, this level, this level, we're going to be fair. So that's been part of the transitioning. But I am very proud of the opportunity to be able to play a part in the development of Florida Pathfinder and Adventure Ministry.
Yeah.
And the team that we have that leads that, their heart is solid, like they're passionate about club ministry. One of the things we did was try to help Florida come more on board with NAD in terms of Pathfinders and Adventures are distinct ministries. They're separate ministries.
Yes.
Some people would call Adventures Pathfinder Adventures. And I was like,
no.
I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure they're just adventures.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
it's separate.
Yeah.
And even getting a deeper understanding of adventure ministry being focused actually on the parents, and adventure ministry being a family ministry, and adventure ministry trying to help the adults learn how to better minister to their kids. Like that's the whole point. And then as kids grow in nearer and nearer to the teen years and hit the teen years, there's a need for independence. There's trying to get away from mom and dad, and the other adults outside of the parents become big in shaping and forming the way that a kid will think about themselves, about church, about God. And so it's important to have the right adults through club ministries to influence those kids to get to a better place in terms of their understanding as they seek independence, which is just part of their natural development. So in that sense, those are some of the things that we've kind of looked at. Now, because of in the last 2 years, we have some space to breathe a little differently. One of the things we've realized is Pathfinder and Adventure Ministry are going really well if you look at it from one angle. If you look at it from the angle of, hey, clubs are growing, we're getting more clubs, we're getting bigger clubs, like there are more kids involved. Like if you look at it from that angle, pat yourself on the back, like, hey, it's going great. But we said, wait a minute, I think there's big room for improvement to take us to another place where the success of a club isn't based on simply the success of a club. It's based on how integrated they are into the life of the ministry of the church. And that it's not just this club independently doing great things, going great places, accomplishing great things, but it's the church taking that journey with them, and the kids seeing that they're a part of a church. They're not just a part of a club. And then the layer up from that is not only are you a part of a local church, but you're part of a conference, which is part of a union, which is part of a division, which is part of a worldwide movement. And so just seeing that bigger picture, that's one angle. The other angle, when we looked at that angle, we said, maybe we could do better. Like maybe we can do better. The other angle that we saw was we're not doing a good job helping Pathfinders and Adventures integrate into the bigger picture of children youth ministry for the local church. So we have kids who, when it's Pathfinder Sabbath, they don't show up in youth Sabbath school. They just practice and get ready. We have, when they go to the campouts, they don't go to youth Sabbath school. Like they just do their campouts. And so we've got tension between pastors saying, hey, like they're a part of the church, but they're always gone, or they're a part of the church, but they're not integrated and involved. So one of the things we've launched for 2019 is a training called A New Kind of Leader. And the idea is we're going to go bigger than just club ministry. And we want club ministry to be a part of the package that a church has to reach young people. Because every time I go to a Pathfinder Sabbath or Adventure Sabbath for a church, I notice that there are kids not in uniform. I notice that not every kid is in a club. And so what's the church doing for those kids? If it's like a typical church, maybe they have a Sabbath school. Maybe the leader shows up on time or close to on time. Maybe they've prepared a lesson and are actually going to give solid content, but that's a hit and miss. And so what we're saying is, what if we could take the platform of club ministries and help our adventure and Pathfinder leaders see a bigger picture of how to minister to a kid, not just through club ministry, and help them get integrated through the bigger picture of the church. And then we said, shoot, if we do that, but we don't get the pastors on board and we don't get those other leaders on board, then the Pathfinder Adventure leaders are going to hit a wall. They're going to get excited about changing things and making it more integrated, but we're going to frustrate them and set them up for failure if it's not part of a bigger picture. So for a year, we've worked hard to lay the foundation with our leadership team, all our coordinators, all our volunteers. We've worked hard to meet with our pastors to try to talk to them and get them ready so that pastors and elders, church leaders, children's ministries leaders, Pathfinder adventure leaders, all these people that need to be at the table, our belief is if we can get the right people in the room and have the
Mhm.
right conversations, then we can start to move the needle in terms of reaching kids holistically and helping integrate what happens at home, what happens through the club ministries, what happens at the church. And everybody kind of sees this big picture of where the local church is trying to go to bless kids and minister to kids. And Pathfinders and Adventures is a part of that. It's not
Yes.
the whole of that. So that's
Gotcha.
the part that I think is most exciting as we think about this year. So our goal is to do 8 area trainings. Our goal is to do 12 local church trainings. And through that, to impact between 50 and 100 churches with this
Wow.
new way of looking at what it means to be a new kind of leader and what it means to minister to kids in a bigger picture and not just in the limited picture of Pathfinder and Adventure ministry.
Wow. Could you, like, basically, you said hitting around 50 to 100 churches. Could you give us like a estimate of how many Pathfinders you know are within that conference or your conference?
Yeah, so we've got about 150, 160 Pathfinder clubs
Okay.
registered with our conference. We've got about 140 adventure clubs.
Wow.
We've got about 100, we've got 320 churches in the conference. The conference membership is about 65,000.
Okay.
When I came from New England to Florida for the interview, one of the then directors told me we've got about 10,000
Wow.
Pathfinders in Florida. And I was like, 10,000? Like
Yeah,
Southern New England had 12,000 members, right? The whole
that's right.
conference.
That's
And
right.
so I was like, 10,000, there's no way. I've learned since that includes adventures, master guides, pathfinders, all the leadership. So it's a big number, but it's a
Yeah.
big conference, and there are a lot of people involved in club ministries. When we do our numbers based on clubs that register with us and all that, we have close to 3,000 Pathfinder kids and about 1,500, 1,800 adventure kids. Those are the numbers we get, but we know all our clubs aren't reporting.
Mhm.
But that's kind of where we are on that.
Wow. So that's a major undertaking and a lot under that's why I can see why the conference decided to separate those ministries, because to have all that Pathfinder adventure and all the other aspects of youth ministry, young adult ministry, camp ministry, there's so many things in youth ministry that it's good to separate that and give you some breathing space. um, and I have to attest, I do remember being in Southern New England and hearing, Florida conference is different. They have their own store, which I believe is pathfindershirts.com.
That's actually a different
Oh,
company,
that's a difference. Okay.
yeah.
All right. But I do remember the different levels, but I would say that Florida was being a pioneer in that, because uh,
True.
when NAD realized that, they created the TLT ministry, which is now everywhere. But Florida was the ones that thought of it first and created 2 extra classes. So that was very good for them.
Yeah.
So basically, you have given us like a little crash course of how much responsibility, how much of an undertaking it is being a youth director, a Pathfinder director for a conference, creating a new curriculum, which I think is brilliant. I've been following it, and I know that that's what we need. That's why I'm starting this podcast as well about mentorship, because we need to empower the young people to start I like to call it the circle of training, where basically we
Nice.
pass it on and they train, and then Pathfinder ministry continues. Because I've seen even up in Southern New England Conference where you have a great director, very on fire for the Lord, and then you have a great club, but then that director moves and then the club dissipates, and it's because it wasn't integrated into the church. So that's a great point that you brought up. One more question I have about
Sure.
being a Pathfinder director. Oshkosh is this year.
Yeah.
So that's a big event, and it's a lot of training, a lot of preparation. What is your conference doing that is different from other years in preparation for Oshkosh?
Yeah. I don't know that there's a lot different. I did help Florida get to Oshkosh in 2014, and so that was nice. It gives me some history, so I feel like it's not the first rodeo, so to speak. And in that sense, I feel good about it. Florida does organize transportation of equipment and gear, and that's something that we did in New England too. Like we rented some big U-Haul trucks and helped clubs get gear out to the camporee. And so we'll do that. The difference is that we'll take two semis, like two 53-foot semis. We'll get loaded with Pathfinder gear. We'll buy containers. We call them D-containers. Hello. And in those D-containers, they can put all their gear and equipment. So that's what we're doing. We're working on our entrance. We've already designed our shirt, but we're still behind on our pin. I haven't found a design for a pin yet that I like, so we haven't finished that. We haven't finished our entrance yet, so I'm still working on that. But we have built our team. We're building our team of leaders that will be there. We're starting to assign them different roles. We've created budget. The conference here has been very supportive to say, here's an additional budget outside of your regular budget to be able to help to move your team to Oshkosh to support the clubs that will be there. Last I checked, Florida had a little over 1,500 Pathfinders registered for Oshkosh. I was hoping we'd get to 3,000, so we'll see if that happens or not. But I know that there's potential to take at least 2,000 Pathfinder people from Florida out there. We will do some honors. Florida has created a state study honor, which we'll do and teach there, and a lot of clubs can use that on the way, because many clubs will drive or come through different states, and they can do part of the state study honor on their way. And that's a thing that we did last time as well. So we're excited about those things. There's not a lot of stuff different that we're doing for 2019, but we're excited about the opportunity to be at Oshkosh.
Wow. So there you go. It's a lot of work, but it's a blessing, because that's something I know Pathfinders are looking forward to.
Absolutely.
Could you, since this page is about mentorship, could you also tell us another piece of advice that a mentor gave you that really was impactful in your life?
Yeah, I can. In terms of just different ways that people have been a blessing to me, I know that one time I interviewed for a job as a youth director in a conference, and I didn't take the job. My wife and I didn't feel like it was the right thing, but the interview was worth it because the conference president took my wife and I out to dinner with he and his wife. And this was before I even went to Southern New England. He told me this. He said, "Pedro, how do you feel about being a youth director? Like, what do you think will be the challenges? What are you looking forward to?" And I told him, I said, I don't know everything about Pathfinders. Like, I don't know it all. Like, I feel like I'm familiar with it. Like, I've worked with it. I've been a chaplain in a Pathfinder club. I was a Pathfinder as a kid, but it's not like if you cut me, I'm not going to bleed triangles, right? Like I said, I know people that if you cut them, they would bleed triangles.
Yes, that's
they are
me.
diehards. And he made this statement to me. Don told me, he said, "Pedro, you don't have to know everything." And I said, "What?" He said, "In fact, you will never know more than everyone that's in your conference. They've been doing it for longer than you have. They'll know more. So all you have to do is know them. Like, if you know the people that know more than you, then what you really need to do, and what we would ask you to do, is to provide leadership." And he said, that's something that they need from you. They need you to provide leadership and help them to become what they could become. In terms of knowing it all, don't let that stop you from becoming a youth director, because you'll never know more than the people that you serve. And that was a huge relief for me, because that made me say, cool, I don't have to know it all. Like, that was a relief for me, because it was a chance to say, leadership, I understand. Like, leadership I can bring. Like, I can help people grow and develop as leaders. But the whole part of knowing everything, that was a concern for me. And he helped alleviate that. So when he told me the main focus is give them leadership, not know everything, I felt relieved and felt ready to jump in and do something.
Wow. Thank you so much, Pastor. That is a great advice for somebody like me who wants to become a youth director actually in the future. So So that advice is good. So anybody listening to right now, you don't have to know everything. You'll never know everything. Don't be afraid to do what God has called you to do. And my next question was any words of encouragement, but I think that's a pretty good encouraging word right there. You don't have to know everything. If God has called you, you should go forward into that. But could you give any last words to anybody who is in youth ministry, who wants to be in youth ministry or are struggling in it?
Sure. And I know, I must say one other thing too. The person who was the principal when I was in academy was a former pastor, but he had also been a former camp ranger. He had also done other things. He said, Pedro, no one could have ever made me believe that I would be a principal one day. But he said God had given him opportunities to pastor churches, to work at a camp, to be a camp director. And he said, now God's opened a door for me to be a principal. And he said, the one thing that I would tell you, because I had already told him I was thinking about ministry when I was finishing academy, he said, the one thing I can tell you is to just be open to whatever God has for you. And God might open a door for you to be a pastor, youth director. Like, just trust that God knows your heart and he knows what you want to do, and he'll do it. And I've seen that over and over, and I've reflected back on his advice over and over. So in terms of like, what advice would I give to anyone who's looking to be in youth ministry? I would say God knows what he's doing. And I think the best advice I could give is get involved in the life and in the heart of what ministry is, whether it's in the local church, whether it's helping with the conference. Like, cream always rises to the top. And if you're involved in all these ministries and you have a chance to be exposed to things, people talk. Like, that's another thing you learn in ministry, is that people talk, and you hope they talk good things. You hear the bad things sometimes, but as people talk, one of the things is they'll say, man, have you seen Eric? Have you seen what he's doing with this? Have you seen? And so then when they come to this thing, that your name gets on their mind, and God uses those kind of things. I don't think that it's about us trying to jockey for positions or trying to make people notice us. But I think some of my friends in college, they didn't get involved in the campus. They really didn't take their church assignment seriously. And so when it came time for the conference presidents to come interview kids, it was like, who are they going to look for? Like, when they talk to the religious professors, they're going to say, who's doing a good job? Who's involved on campus? Who's taking their church role? Like, who are your top students? And those are the students that are going to get talked to and get offered jobs. And so take time to get involved. Like, if you want to be in this line of work professionally, then continue to invest and continue to put your time there. And if God opens the door, great, but don't do it so he opens the door, but do it so that if God opens the door, then that's what's your future. Then he'll open that and it'll make sense.
Thank you so much, Pastor. I can tell by your dedication and that you are truly a man of God. You are one of the mentors I look to, even though it's unofficially. I still look towards you. When you went to the LTC last year for Summer New England Conference, I would just stand outside the door and listen. And anyone who is listening right now, if Pastor Pedro comes to your leadership convention and he has a seminar, you need to be a part of it, because this man really is dedicated to youth ministry. He knows this stuff. God is using him, and that advice that he gave is so beautiful. Basically, you're in youth ministry to serve the young people, and that's why we're here. So
And God will take care of the rest.
Thank you so much, Pastor. So I thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for giving your time up for it. So everyone who is listening, if you enjoyed this, please share, pass the word along, and so we can learn more about youth ministry together. We're right here at Youth Ministry and Mentorship 101, where we always say, youth ministry is not a stepping stone into ministry. Youth ministry is ministry, period.